Very good morning to all. So in this session, we are going to discuss about the unit 4 topics. So grid-based method. So before going to start about the grid-based method, so I want to share something about the grid-based methods, which is belongs to what kind of concepts in data mining. So the grid-based methods are one of the methodology used with clustering. So generally, clustering is a grouping of of objects in a cluster. Okay, so if suppose the high similarity of objects are grouped in a cluster, grouped into a cluster. Okay, so we have k-means clustering is one of the technique used in the clustering concepts, and density based, hierarchy based, and grid based. So here in the grid based clustering approach, it is going to use a multi-resolution grid structure. It quantizes the object space into finite number of cells that forms a grid structure on which all of the operations for clustering are performed. The main advantage of approach is its fast processing time. And in the grid-based method, it uses a concept called string. The string is nothing but it is the statistical information grid. The string is a grid-based multi-resolution clustering technique in which the spatial area is divided into rectangle area. So the next slide, I will see. I will show you the grid process. There are usually several levels of such rectangle cells corresponding to the different levels of resolution, and these cells form a hierarchical structure. Each cell at high level is partitioned to form a number of cells at the next lower level. So the statistical information regarding the attributes in each grid cell, such as mean, maximum, and the minimum values, is pre-computed and stored. These statistical parameters are useful for query processing. So this is a simple diagram. So the first layer is is a rectangle. So here there is no division of a grid. So in when we are going in depth, so the rectangle area is divided into number of cells. The statistical parameters of higher level cells can easily be computed from the parameters of lower level cells. So here some of the parameters are used. So the attribute independent parameters are count. The attribute dependent parameters are mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum. And the type of distribution that attribute value in the cell follows, such as normal, uniform, and exponential. When the data are loaded into database, the parameters count, mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum of the bottom level cells are calculated directly from the data. The value of distribution may be either assigned by the user if the distribution type is known beforehand, or obtained by hypothesis test. The type of distribution of higher level cells can be computed based on the majority of distribution types of its corresponding lower level cells in conjunction with their threshold filtering process. If the distribution of the lower cells disagree with each other and fail threshold test, the distributed type of higher level cells is set to none. First, so here we are going to discuss about the processing of string operation. A layer within the higher structure is determined from which the query answering process is to start. This layer typically contains a small number of cells. For each cell in the current layer, we compute the confidence interval reflecting the cell's relevancy to the given query. The irrelevant cells are removed from the further consideration. Processing of the next lower level examines only the remaining relevant cells. This process is repeated until the bottom layer is reached. At this time, if the query specification is met, the region of relevant cells that satisfy the query are returned. Otherwise, data that fall into relevant cells are retrieved and further process will be met requirements of the query. So the grid computation is query independent because the statistical information stored in each cell represents the summary information of the data in the grid cell independent of the query. The grid structure facilitates parallel processing and independent updating. So, overall, with respect to of these string operations, so you just consider these as an example. So the first layer is the area is divided into rectangle. So when we are going to process the rectangle area, we only consider the which are all the data are considered in the sequence, the space. So those data are considered for the next level, and repeatedly perform these operation and get the final output. So this is what the operations are performed with the grid based method. Thank you.